morning and welcome to Rising. We've got another just terrific, simply pleasurable show for you today. That's what I'm going with. Hello, Niall.
That's as good a billing as any, and I'm sure there'll be lots of pleasurable debate of one kind or another.
Indeed.
Lots to talk about, as always. Robby, what's on your radar?
Well, Niall, Health and Human Services appointee Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is once again under attack from all sides, ostensibly because of long-ago comments he made about the origins of COVID, because of the pro-life movement distrusting him, and also because he will be joined by Dr. Mehmet Oz in a key health role. Now, I'm about to tackle all three of these points, starting with Dr. Oz. On Tuesday, RFK Jr.'s HHS came into focus with a bit more clarity as President-elect Donald Trump nominated Dr. Oz, a TV personality and failed Senate candidate from Pennsylvania, to lead the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services. In a statement, Trump said that, quote, "I have known Dr. Oz for many years, and I am confident he will fight to ensure everyone in America receives the best possible health care so that our country can be great and healthy again. Dr. Oz will be a leader in incentivizing disease prevention so we get the best results in the world for every dollar we spend on health care in our great country." RFK Jr. wrote on X that he was very glad to have Dr. Oz aboard. And Republican Senator Rand Paul also offered his congratulations, saying that his background as a public health advocate makes Dr. Oz an excellent fit for this position. Dr. Oz, it should be noted, ran an uninspired campaign for Pennsylvania's Senate seat in 2022, losing out to Democrat John Fetterman. Now, whether Dr. Oz rises to the challenge remains to be seen. But make no mistake, he has a tough job. Medicare is a massive public entitlement program, and its costs are spiraling out of control. The program, after all, represents a massive transfer of wealth from younger, healthier Americans to older Americans. And the country's aging population means that costs continue to go up and up and up, something that the government will eventually have to fix one way or another. Unsurprisingly, the choice of Dr. Oz for this important job drew plenty of criticism from the mainstream media. RFK Jr. himself also attracted a fresh round of criticism, not just from mainstream media, mostly from conservatives. Fox News reports that pro-life groups have concerns about the staunchly pro-choice RFK Jr. Abortion policy does, after all, fall under the purview of HHS. Will RFK Jr. follow in the Biden administration's footsteps and continue to deregulate and make more accessible the abortion drug mifepristone? It's a relevant question and one that RFK Jr. will have to answer from pro-lifers at his confirmation hearings. Now, RFK Jr. also faced criticism on Tuesday for recently unearthed comments he made about the COVID-19 pandemic. The Bulwark, a nominally right-of-center but in practice reliably never-Trump publication, touted a video clip they discovered in which RFK Jr. says the government may have planned COVID. Now, the Bulwark's Sam Stein described that revelation as follows, quote, "In previously unreported video, RFK Jr. said he believed the government may have planned the COVID pandemic." My response? Well, the word may is doing some heavy lifting there, and the Bulwark is trying to make RFK Jr.'s comments sound a bit crazier than they actually were. No surprises there, but let's just let you watch the clip. Decide for yourself.
Many people argue that this pandemic was a plandemic, that it was planned from the outset, that it's part of a sinister scheme. I can't tell you the answer to that. I don't have enough evidence. A lot of it feels very planned to me, but I don't know. I will tell you this. If you create these mechanisms for control, they become weapons of obedience for authoritarian regimes, no matter how beneficial or innocent the people who created them.
So based on his actual comments, RFK Jr. said the government may have planned the pandemic in the same sense that I would say the government may have evidence of alien life, but we don't know because we haven't seen the evidence and no one has presented any. Now, I think that's a fair statement. RFK Jr. is certainly right that the response to the pandemic was highly planned and coordinated by top U.S. federal health officials and that vast restrictions on our civil liberties ensued. I would also argue that RFK Jr. is right to question not whether the outbreak was planned, because there's really no reason to think it was, but whether the federal government's program of experimenting on coronaviruses was so reckless as to constitute a willful and malicious plot, even though the pandemic itself was, and I must emphasize this, unplanned. Again, to be clear, no evidence that government officials planned the pandemic, We do know, thanks to terrific reporting from watchdog groups like U.S. Right to Know and information obtained by media institutions, mainstream media institutions such as Vanity Fair and ProPublica and the left-leaning Intercept, whose reports we have interviewed people who have found this information on rising time and time again. We know from all of this that federal health bureaucrats plan to use taxpayer dollars to experiment on bat coronaviruses in Wuhan, China, making the viruses more deadly and more contagious. We also know that the scientists behind this proposal tried to hide that fact that the research would be conducted in China under laboratory conditions that do not live up to regulator safety standards. We know that when confronted about all of this, Dr. Anthony Fauci repeatedly attempted to mislead the public about the federal government's potential culpability. Now, it's true that we don't know for sure whether COVID-19 emerged as the result of such a laboratory accident or from nature in a wet market. We do know that government scientists sought to perform the exact kind of research that many experts worried could cause a pandemic, and that they proposed to carry out such research in the exact facility that is situated very near the actual location of the initial outbreak. Did they plan to cause a pandemic? I don't think so. That wouldn't make a lot of sense. They had no way to control it. It killed many scientists and government figures as well. But that's like saying, well, you didn't plan to run over all those innocent bystanders in your car, even though you knew full well what you were doing when you chose to drive home after a bender at the bar instead of taking an Uber. At some point, it's so damning that it hardly matters whether it was planned or not. Now, it remains to be seen which health initiatives RFK Jr. will champion when and if he takes the helm at HHS. But I, for one, am not particularly disturbed that the incoming secretary thinks the government's contributions to the pandemic are potentially very suspect. I would be more worried about a secretary who had a plan to keep letting the Dr. Faucis of the world sign off on public funding for dangerous coronavirus research that looks increasingly like a plausible cause, not a proven cause, but a plausible cause of a, yes, unplanned pandemic that nevertheless killed millions globally.
Oh, Robby.
Oh, Niall.
We're going to disagree.
Let
I
me
think.
have it. Go for it.
So I think that there are questions around the gain of function research and all of that, which is an argument that is a very in-depth argument and would take us the whole segment if we launched into that. I do think you're being much too generous, in my view, to Robert F. Kennedy Jr., because I think his modus operandi is to put forth these things to which he's just asking questions. It's the Donald Trump, many people are saying it kind of form of arguing, as a way to inject innuendo or things that are unproven into public debate. And in the clip that we played, he said, for example, about the pandemic, a lot of it feels very planned to me. What does that actually mean? It doesn't mean anything. There's no rigorous way to test why it feels that way to RFK Jr. or not. It's just using innuendo in a way to which there's plausible deniability, just as he did whenever you remember the whole furor, whenever he said that there was, and I better get this quote exactly right, there's an argument that the COVID pandemic, is ethnically targeted. And he then went on to talk about how Ashkenazi Jews may be somehow less susceptible to it than white people and black people. This is just what he does. It is to say, oh, there is a view, but I'm not saying it, but I actually am saying it. And that's why I think he's a very disingenuous person. Well,
look, you can always benefit from more precise language, and I would urge him to use more precise language. If that were me answering that question, right, I would just say, well, there's no evidence that it's planned. It was an incidental outbreak. These are the two theories for how the outbreak could have resulted. No one credible is suggesting that happened on purpose. But I think what he says, when features of it sound planned, he should just clarify so we would know, so we don't have to speculate, and I don't have to take his comments charitably, and you don't have to take them uncharitably. But he could say, for instance, that the DNA makeup of the virus itself, the furin cleavage site looks like it was. Again, this is not many people are saying. This is some experts have looked at this and says it looks like these are features that were manipulated by genetic engineers, which is why some experts believe it is more likely to have come out of the laboratory.
Right.
Planned in that sense. Now, you're right. I don't think no one has presented evidence that the government planned to have a catastrophic global pandemic outbreak that killed millions of people. That wouldn't even make sense. If it was China, lots of Chinese people died, it doesn't make any sense really. But there are certainly aspects of it that, I mean, that's what I would say to the aspects of it seem planned point.
Yeah, I mean, what I would say there is that you said something to the effect that RFK Jr. should use more precise language. And I think this gets back to the generous or ungenerous interpretation of him. He should use more precise language if what he is intending to do is communicate a more precise meaning. My argument is it's not that he's like somehow messing up the language or talking in overly general terms. I think he is intending to push forth these innuendos for which there is either no evidence or extremely limited evidence. And I think he does that again and again. And on occasion when he is, I would say, inadvertently less equivocal, like when he said there is no vaccine that is safe and effective, he then tries to row back from that in other ways and said, well, I said that, but I didn't exactly mean that precisely. And so I just find him a very disreputable figure.
Well, tell us what you think. We'll be back with more Rising right after this.